The chemical alarms shrieked at exactly 4 p.m., their deafening wail echoing through the pristine lab space. Everyone scrambled, grabbing phones and bags, rushing toward the emergency exits like startled birds. I watched them go, my heart pounding against my ribs. Mandatory evacuation. This is not a drill. The automated voice boomed overhead. Hazardous chemical leak detected. Exit immediately. But something felt wrong. 20 minutes before the quarterly audit, the timing was too perfect. Instead of joining the stampede, I slid beneath my workstation, laptop clutched to my chest. Through the glass partition, I watched as 3 figures in yellow hazmat suits entered our now empty lab. They glanced around quickly before peeling off their protective gear with practiced efficiency. "All clear," said Damon, our division head, his voice muffled through the partition. "Let's make this quick." My breath caught as I recognized the other two, Nora from operations and Philip, the safety compliance officer, the very people who should be protecting us. "The auditors arrive at 4:30, Philip said, checking his watch. "Swap the batch numbers on the chromium tests first." Nora nodded, fingers flying across the keyboard of our main testing terminal. "What about Arden's findings?" "She's been running unauthorized secondary tests." My stomach clenched at the mention of my name. "I've been deleting her results as they come in," Damon replied, pulling open the filing cabinet. "She suspects something, but she can't prove it. Nobody listens to her anyway." The trio laughed, and something inside me shattered. 6 years of dedication to this company. 6 years believing I was protecting people by ensuring our chemical testing was accurate, all for nothing. "These reports show acceptable levels," Philip said, spreading papers across the lab bench. "Replace everything from the last quarter. The numbers match what's in the system now." I fumbled for my phone, hitting record. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped it. The video would be shaky, but the audio would capture everything. "How long until the sensors reset?" Nora asked. 20 minutes, Damon answered. "Plenty of time to." The lab door swung open. 3 people in business attire stepped inside, led by a stern-faced woman with a clipboard. "We finished early across town and decided to come straight over," she announced, surveying the empty lab. "I'm Gloria Wolcott, lead auditor. Why is your department evacuated?" Damon's face paled. "Chemical leak. The alarms." "Strange," Gloria interrupted, checking a small device on her belt. "Our portable sensors don't detect anything unusual in the air." That's when I emerged from beneath my workstation, laptop still in hand. The look on Damon's face, shock morphing into fury, would have been comical under different circumstances. "Arden," he sputtered, "why aren't you evacuated with the others?" Before I could answer, the exterior doors burst open again as my colleagues began filtering back in, confusion evident on their faces. "All clear?" someone asked. "The emergency response team outside said they haven't detected any leak." Gloria's eyes narrowed, darting between me and the stack of reports still spread across the lab bench. "What's happening here?" "I was wondering the same thing," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, especially since this is the 4th emergency evacuation we've had, right before an audit this year. Silence fell across the lab. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. "I think someone has been falsifying our chemical safety tests," I continued, stepping forward, "and using fake emergencies to clear the lab so they can tamper with the evidence." Before I go any further with what happened next, I need to ask, if this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. I've kept this bottled up for so long, and sharing it helps more than you know. Drop a comment if you've ever had that moment where you discovered people you trusted were living a complete lie. My name is Arden Bailey. Until 6 months ago, I was a senior chemical safety analyst at one of the largest industrial manufacturing plants in the Midwest. I joined the company fresh out of grad school, passionate and idealistic. My specialty was testing wastewater for toxic metals, chromium, lead, mercury, ensuring that what we discharged met environmental regulations. I wasn't always the person who'd stand up in a room full of executives and call out corruption. Growing up, I was the quiet girl who got perfect grades and never made waves. My father worked 40 years at the same factory, coming home with chemical burns on his hands but never complaining. "That's just how it is," he'd say when I asked why he didn't speak up about safety violations. Maybe watching him slowly deteriorate from industrial exposure is what drove me to this field. The first time I noticed something wrong was 18 months before that fateful audit day. A routine test of our wastewater showed chromium levels at 2.3 parts per million, more than double the legal limit. I ran the test 3 times to be sure, documented everything meticulously, and submitted my findings through the proper channels. 3 days later, I checked the database to see what remediation plan had been implemented. To my surprise, the entry showed chromium levels at zero point 0.9 parts per million, completely within legal limits. I thought I'd made an error, so I ran new tests. Same high result. When I brought this discrepancy to Philip, our safety compliance officer, he smiled thinly. "You must have contaminated your sample," he said. "Don't worry about it. The official results look fine." I might have accepted that explanation if it happened once, but over the next year, the pattern repeated with disturbing regularity. Every time I found elevated levels of toxic metals, the official records would mysteriously change within days. When I began keeping a separate log of my original findings, my access to certain testing stations became restricted. "We're restructuring the department," Damon explained when he revoked my primary testing privileges. "You'll be handling quality assurance documentation instead." They didn't fire me. That would have been too suspicious. Instead, they tried to bore me into quitting by assigning me mindless paperwork. What they didn't realize was that this new position gave me access to historical testing data going back 5 years. Night after night, I stayed late, combing through thousands of test results, finding patterns of alteration. The company was systematically dumping improperly treated chemical waste into the watershed that fed into Riverbrook, a working-class community 10 miles downstream. The same community where my father had lived his entire life. The same community experiencing a sudden spike in kidney disease and developmental disorders in children. The morning before that audit day, I'd visited my father in the hospital. His kidneys were failing, and doctors couldn't explain why a healthy man would deteriorate so quickly. As I sat beside his hospital bed, watching machines filter the toxins from his blood, something hardened inside me. "You look angry, sweetheart," he'd said, his voice weak. "I am angry," I'd replied, squeezing his hand. "Someone needs to be." That afternoon, I made 2 crucial decisions. First, I installed a small program on my laptop that would automatically back up all testing data to my personal cloud storage. Second, I bought a personal chemical detector, the kind emergency responders use, and began carrying it everywhere. Which brings us back to that day, standing in the lab with the auditors, watching Damon's carefully constructed facade begin to crumble. "These are serious accusations," Gloria said, glancing between me and the management team. "Do you have any proof?" Damon laughed, regaining his composure. "Arden has been struggling with performance issues lately. We've documented her growing paranoia in her personnel file." A familiar, sinking feeling washed over me. They'd prepared for this possibility, building a case against me. Looking around at my colleagues' faces, I saw doubt, confusion, and, worst of all, pity. They thought I was having some kind of breakdown. "I understand how this looks," I said, opening my laptop, "but I've been tracking the alterations." I turned the screen toward Gloria, showing a split view of the same test results. The original I'd backed up and the altered version now in the system. "These chromium readings have been changed. I can show you dozens more examples." Philip stepped forward. "Anyone can fabricate spreadsheets, Arden. This doesn't prove anything." "What about the video I just recorded of you 3 discussing how to swap reports before the auditors arrived?" I asked, holding up my phone. "Does that prove anything?" The color drained from their faces. "You were hiding during a mandatory evacuation?" Nora sputtered. "That's a serious safety violation. An evacuation triggered by an alarm that my personal chemical detector shows was completely unnecessary," I countered, pointing to the device clipped to my belt. Its green light glowed steadily. No chemical hazard detected. Gloria turned to Damon. "I think we need to continue this audit in your office, with your legal team present." As they left the lab, a heavy silence descended. My colleagues stared at me with new eyes, some with admiration, others with fear of what might happen to their jobs. What no one realized was that the video and altered reports were just the beginning. Over the past 3 months, I'd been building a comprehensive case, not just against Damon, Philip, and Nora, but against the entire executive team that had knowingly permitted the dumping of toxic waste for years. I'd connected with an environmental scientist studying the disease cluster in Riverbrook. I'd tracked down former employees who'd been fired after raising concerns. I'd even mapped the property values around the company, discovering that executives had quietly sold their homes near the watershed years ago, just before the contamination would have reached detectable levels. But as I stood there in the lab that day, I had no idea how deep the corruption went, or how dangerous my position had become. I didn't know that before the night was over, someone would break into my apartment. I couldn't have predicted that my father would suffer a sudden complication at the hospital within hours of my confrontation. I was just one person standing against a corporation willing to poison an entire town for profit. And while I thought exposing them to auditors was my moment of triumph, I was wrong. It was merely the opening move in a game I wasn't fully prepared to play. The next morning, I arrived at work to find my keycard deactivated. After 20 minutes of waiting in the lobby, a woman from Human Resources I'd never seen before escorted me to a small conference room where Damon sat with two men in expensive suits. Arden, Damon nodded coolly. This is Trevor from Legal and Martin from Information Security. The atmosphere in the room pressed down like a weight. Through the glass wall, I could see colleagues glancing over, then quickly looking away when our eyes met. We need to discuss your unauthorized recording of confidential business conversations, Trevor began, sliding a document across the table, and your removal of proprietary company data. I left the paper untouched. You mean my recording of criminal activity and preservation of evidence showing environmental violations? Trevor's smile tightened. The company takes all allegations seriously. We've placed you on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. He tapped the document. This non-disclosure agreement. No, I said simply. Martin leaned forward. Miss Bailey, we found several unauthorized programs on your workstation. Frankly, that's grounds for immediate termination. Then terminate me. Damon's eye twitched. These weren't the responses they'd prepared for. We're trying to handle this amicably, Damon said. Sign the agreement, turn over all copies of company data and recordings, and we'll provide 6 months severance. I thought about my father lying in his hospital bed, tubes carrying his blood through dialysis machines, about the children in Riverbrook born with developmental issues, about the company's 5-year pattern of dumping toxic waste while hiding the evidence. No, I repeated, I don't think I will. As security escorted me out, I noticed people watching from every doorway. Zoe, my closest colleague, stepped forward like she might speak, then retreated when Martin glared at her. Even through the shame of the perp walk, I kept my head high. Outside, parked across from my car, a police cruiser waited with lights off. A warning? A threat? I couldn't be sure. My phone rang as I reached my car. The hospital. Miss Bailey, your father's had another episode. His potassium levels spiked suddenly. We've stabilized him, but you should come in. I drove straight to the hospital, mind racing. Dad had been stable for weeks. Why would his levels suddenly spike? In his room, I found a nurse I didn't recognize checking his IV. What are you giving him? I asked, perhaps too sharply. She startled. Just routine fluids and medications prescribed by Dr. Wells. My father's doctor is Bennett, not Wells. A flicker of something crossed her face. She quickly finished and left, muttering about checking the chart. I studied the IV bag and tubing. Nothing seemed visibly wrong, but I wasn't a medical professional. When the regular nurse came in, I asked her about the change in doctors. There's no Dr. Wells on this floor, she said, checking Dad's chart with a frown. And no medication changes were ordered today. That night, I slept in the hospital chair beside my father, too afraid to leave him alone. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Back door left unlocked. Take what you need, Z. Zoe? I thought immediately. But why would she have a new number? When I finally returned home the following morning to shower and change, I found my apartment door slightly ajar. Inside, dresser drawers hung open, clothes strewn across the floor. My laptop was gone, along with the external hard drive containing my backup files. Thankfully, they hadn't found everything. Weeks earlier, paranoia had driven me to keep multiple copies of the evidence in different locations. The most comprehensive set was hidden on a micro SD card inside an old stuffed penguin my father had given me as a child. While I stood surveying the damage, my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? They're watching your apartment. The voice was hushed, distorted. Meet me at Truman Bridge in 30 minutes. Come alone. Who is this? Someone else who got pushed out. 30 minutes. Don't bring your phone. The line went dead. I debated with myself. This could be a trap, but if there was someone else who knew what was happening, someone who could corroborate my findings, I needed to talk to them. Truman Bridge spanned the same river that carried waste from our plant into Riverbrook. Halfway across the pedestrian walkway, a thin man with hunched shoulders leaned against the railing, watching the water below. Wade, I said, recognizing our former environmental compliance manager who'd supposedly resigned for personal reasons last year. He nodded without looking at me. Didn't think they'd go after you, Arden. You were always the quiet one, playing by the rules. Until the rules turned out to be lies. Did they visit your home yet? They'll make it look like a regular break-in. Last night, I confirmed. How did you know? Because the same thing happened to me after I found the first cluster of kidney cases in Riverbrook. Apartment ransacked, fired for data theft, then strange accidents. My car brakes failed on the highway. A chill ran through me despite the warm spring air. The company made 3 separate settlements with Riverbrook residents, he continued, all sealed by judges with financial ties to our parent corporation. I tracked 15 cases of kidney failure directly to our wastewater output, including my father, I said. Wade finally turned to look at me. Your father? Ellis Bailey? Yes. He's in renal failure. Stage 4. Something like guilt flashed across Wade's face. Ellis was my first hire when I joined the company 20 years ago. I didn't know he was sick. He paused. Or that he was your father. Why did you want to meet? Wade pulled a flash drive from his pocket. Because of this. Medical records, soil samples, water testing, everything I collected before they pushed me out. I've been afraid to use it, but maybe you can. As I reached for it, a black sedan pulled up at the end of the bridge. 2 men in dark suits stepped out. Wade shoved the drive into my hand. Run now. What about you? I'll delay them. They're already watching you. Be careful who you trust. He pressed something else into my palm. A business card. This reporter was investigating the company last year. Find her. I slipped away as Wade walked toward the men, arms raised in apparent surrender. By the time I reached the other side of the bridge, all 3 had disappeared. The card read, Talia Merritt, investigative journalist, with a phone number and email address. That evening, I sat in a 24-hour diner 10 miles from my apartment, using their free Wi-Fi to upload Wade's files to a secure cloud account. The data was damning. Internal memos acknowledging the toxic dumping, medical records of affected employees, and most shocking, a list of payments to local officials who had blocked previous investigations. I composed an email to Talia with a link to the files, my finger hovering over the send button. Was I ready for what would happen next? Once this information went public, there would be no going back. My phone buzzed with a call from the hospital. Miss Bailey? It's Nurse Patel. Your father is asking for you. He seems agitated. 20 minutes later, I rushed into Dad's room to find him struggling to sit up in bed. They were here, he wheezed, gripping my arm with surprising strength. Men asking questions about you. What men? What did they want? Said they were insurance investigators. Wanted to know about your mental health history. His eyes, normally kind, hardened with rare anger. I told them, my daughter's not crazy, that she's the sanest, most honest person I know. I squeezed his hand. Thank you, Dad. Arden, he said, voice dropping to a whisper. One of them knew things. About that summer you spent in treatment after Mom died. Things nobody outside the family should know. Ice formed in my stomach. I'd had a mental health episode at 16 after my mother's death. A brief hospitalization that wasn't in any public record. If they knew about that, what else had they uncovered? Dad's heart monitor began beeping faster. Promise me something, he said. Don't let them silence you, but don't let them destroy you either. I won't, I promised, though I wasn't sure how to keep both parts. As I left the hospital, my phone lit up with a message from Talia. Got your email. This is explosive. Need to meet as soon as possible. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop the following morning. I spent the night at a cheap motel paid for with cash, too afraid to return to my apartment. Sleep came in fitful bursts, punctuated by nightmares of drowning in contaminated water. The coffee shop was busy, good for anonymity, bad for private conversation. Talia was younger than I expected, early 30s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Your evidence corroborates what I've been hearing for months, she said after introductions. But nobody would go on record. I will, I told her. She studied me for a moment. You understand what that means? These people have millions to spend discrediting you. They'll dig up every mistake you've ever made, twist every word you've ever spoken. They're already trying, but people are dying, including my father. What choice do I have? Talia nodded slowly. We'll need to move fast. Once they realize I'm involved, they'll try to get an injunction to block publication. As we discussed strategy, I noticed a man at a nearby table paying too much attention to our conversation. When Talia went to the restroom, he slid into her seat. Miss Bailey, he said quietly, my name is Julian. I represent certain shareholders who are disturbed by what they're learning about the company's practices. What do you want? To help you. Some of us want this exposure to happen. The old guard has been cutting corners for too long, putting all investors at risk. I'd learned to be suspicious. Why should I trust you? Julian slid a phone across the table. That belonged to Wade Porter. We retrieved it before the company's security team could. The passcode is his daughter's birthday, April 16th. Check his photos from last month. Before I could respond, Talia returned. Julian nodded politely and returned to his table. Who was that? Talia asked. I'm not sure, I admitted, pocketing the phone. Either an ally or someone playing a very long game. That night, alone in another anonymous motel room, I entered the passcode on Wade's phone. It unlocked immediately. In his photo gallery, I found something unexpected. Pictures taken inside what appeared to be the CEO's home office, showing documents spread across a desk. I zoomed in on one image and felt my breath catch. It was a medical report for Catherine Voss, the CEO's mother, showing advanced kidney disease consistent with chromium poisoning, and a property record showing her primary residence for the past 30 years, 1242 Maple Street, Riverbrook. The CEO had known all along. The same toxic chemicals, poisoning the community, poisoning my father, were also poisoning his own mother. How could anyone be that callous, that calculating? As I stared at the image, another text arrived on my personal phone. Board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. All executives required to attend. Security will be minimal. J. Julian again. Was he giving me an opportunity? For what? Then it hit me. If all the executives would be in the boardroom, their offices would be empty, including the CEO's, with its safe full of documents too sensitive for digital storage, the same safe visible in Wade's photographs. I had less than 12 hours to formulate a plan that could either expose everything or land me in prison. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a dangerous idea began to take shape, a form of justice more fitting than any court could provide. I barely slept that night, my mind racing through possibilities. By dawn, I had a plan, dangerous and potentially illegal, but the stakes were too high for half measures. I dressed carefully in a charcoal pantsuit I'd purchased from a thrift store the evening before. With my hair pulled back and a pair of non-prescription glasses, I resembled any mid-level administrative professional at the company. In my bag, Wade's phone, my own phone, a small digital camera, and the stuffed penguin with its hidden micro SD card. The main lobby buzzed with activity when I arrived at 8:40 a.m. I recognized several board members being escorted toward the executive elevator. Perfect timing. I approached the reception desk with practiced confidence. "Morning, Gina," I said, nodding to the receptionist who had processed my termination paperwork. Her eyes widened slightly. "Miss Bailey, you're not supposed to—" I know, I interrupted apologetically. Human Resources realized they're missing some signed forms for my exit package. Wendy asked me to drop them off this morning. I pulled out a manila folder containing blank papers, said it would be faster than mailing them. Gina hesitated. "I should call security. Please don't bother them. I'll just drop these with Wendy and be gone in 5 minutes." I glanced at my watch. I'm already late for a job interview across town. The small personal detail worked. Gina's expression softened. "Well, I guess that's fine. Do you need me to call Wendy to come get them?" "No need to trouble her during the board meeting. I know where her office is." Gina nodded and buzzed me through. My heart thundered so loudly I was certain she could hear it. The executive floor was eerily quiet. Administrative staff either preparing for the board meeting or tasked with keeping visitors away. I moved quickly past Wendy's empty HR office and toward the executive wing. The CEO's corner office stood behind a smaller workspace occupied by his administrative assistant, who thankfully was absent, probably managing refreshments for the board. The door was locked, but I'd anticipated this. During my research on Wade's phone, I'd noted a photo showing the CEO keeping a spare key in a desk drawer of the outer office. After confirming the hallway was empty, I slipped into the assistant's area and found the key exactly where expected. 60 seconds later, I was inside the CEO's office. The space reeked of privilege, original artwork, custom furniture, windows overlooking the city. On his desk sat a silver frame holding a photograph of an elderly woman with his same sharp eyes, Catherine Voss, his mother. I moved quickly to the wall safe, partially hidden behind a landscape painting. This would be trickier. The photos on Wade's phone showed the safe, but not the combination. Then I spotted a desk calendar with handwritten notes. One entry from 3 weeks ago caught my attention. Mom, 70th, 051249. Catherine's birth date? Worth a try. I entered 051249 into the safe's keypad. Nothing. Reversed it. 491205. The safe remained locked. Panic rose in my throat. I was wasting precious time. Think, Arden. What would a self-important man like him use? His own birth date? A quick search on my phone revealed it. March 8th, 1975. I punched in 030875. The safe clicked open. Inside, I found folders of documents, a passport, some cash, and a small box containing what looked like family jewelry. I ignored these, focusing on a thick red folder labeled Riverbrook Remediation, Confidential. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first page was a legal memo outlining potential liability for historical chemical discharge affecting groundwater in the Riverbrook residential zone. It estimated settlement costs between $400 to $600 million if the connection was proven. The next document turned my blood cold. A private medical report for Catherine Voss confirming chromium poisoning as the cause of her kidney failure. A handwritten note in the margin read, "Must relocate mother as soon as possible. Maintain deniability." He had known. He had moved his mother out of danger while continuing to poison everyone else. Deeper in the file, I found something even more damning. A signed authorization from 5 years ago approving a temporary alternative waste management protocol that knowingly bypassed environmental safeguards. The CEO had personally approved the toxic dumping to save $18 million annually in proper disposal costs. I photographed everything with shaking hands. The final document was the most recent, a strategy memo from their legal team dated just 3 days ago. It outlined a plan to declare bankruptcy for the local operating entity, while shifting assets to a newly created company, effectively escaping liability, while continuing operations under a different name. The memo explicitly mentioned my whistleblowing. Bailey's situation requires immediate containment. Recommend aggressive character mitigation strategy focusing on 2006 psychiatric history and recent performance issues. As I read those words, the office door swung open. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" The CEO himself stood in the doorway, his face twisted with rage. My mind went blank. The board meeting, had it ended early, or had someone tipped him off? "Mr. Voss," I managed, closing the folder. "I was just learning how you poisoned your own mother." His expression shifted from anger to something more calculated. He stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. Arden Bailey, the troubled analyst with a history of mental instability. "Breaking into my office won't help your credibility. Neither will this help yours," I replied, holding up the folder. "You knew the contamination was happening. You moved your mother out of Riverbrook but kept dumping. You chose profit over people, including your own family." A cold smile spread across his face. "And who will believe you? A disgruntled former employee with documented psychiatric issues, trespassing and stealing confidential documents? I almost hoped you'd try something like this. You've just given us everything we need to discredit you completely." He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Security to my office, please." I needed to stall. "Does your mother know that you knew what was making her sick and did nothing to stop it? That you saved only her while letting others suffer?" Something flickered in his eyes. "You know nothing about my mother. I know she raised you better than this." I nodded toward the photograph. "I know she's still fighting stage 4 kidney failure. Just like my father, who worked at this plant for 20 years. His jaw tightened. "Business decisions are complex. You couldn't possibly understand. What's complex about poisoning people for profit?" I cut in. "About watching them die slowly while you collect bonuses?" Heavy footsteps approached in the hallway. "Your mother deserved better," I said quietly. Everyone in Riverbrook deserved better. The door opened and 2 security guards stepped in. The CEO pointed at me. "This woman is trespassing. Escort her out and call the police." As the guards approached, I made no resistance, allowing them to take the folder from my hands and escort me toward the elevator. The CEO followed, his composure regained. "This is the end of your little crusade, Miss Bailey," he said as the elevator doors opened. "I'll personally see that you face charges for breaking and entering, corporate espionage, and theft of confidential documents." I stepped into the elevator with the guards, turning to face him. "Maybe, but first, you might want to check your phone." Confusion crossed his face as the doors closed. In the lobby, the guards marched me toward the exit, past shocked onlookers. Outside, police cruisers already waited with flashing lights. This was it. I had gambled everything and lost. Then a familiar voice called out, "Arden!" Talia rushed forward, camera crew in tow. Behind her came more reporters, microphones extended. "Miss Bailey, can you confirm you've provided evidence of corporate environmental violations? Is it true the CEO's mother is among the victims? What can you tell us about the company's plans to avoid liability through bankruptcy?" The security guards faltered, looking to each other uncertainly. As if on cue, a black SUV pulled up, and Julian stepped out, accompanied by two individuals in FBI windbreakers. "Arden Bailey," one called. "We need to speak with you regarding evidence of federal environmental crimes. You're not under arrest." The security guards released me, backing away from the federal agents. "What's happening?" one guard asked. "Justice," I answered. The revenge I had planned wasn't what anyone expected. Not the dramatic confrontation in the CEO's office, not the documents I'd photographed, though those were crucial. The true revenge had been set in motion hours earlier, when I'd finally understood what needed to be done. While the CEO believed I had broken into his office to steal documents, my actual plan was far more devastating. During those precious minutes alone in his office, I had used his computer to send emails from his account to the board members, Catherine Voss, and key investors. Each email contained different documents from the safe as proof that he had knowingly endangered his own mother while assuring the board that no liability existed. But that was just the beginning. Before entering his office, I had left the stuffed penguin containing all my evidence in plain sight on his assistant's desk, with a note reading, "Return to Catherine Voss." The assistant, recognizing Mrs. Voss's name, would ensure it reached her, along with irrefutable proof that her son had known about the contamination for years while she suffered. The most powerful blow, however, came from Julian. He wasn't just a concerned shareholder, he was Catherine Voss's nephew, the CEO's cousin, who had watched his beloved aunt deteriorate while suspecting the cause. When Wade had approached him with initial evidence months ago, Julian began working from inside, gathering allies among board members and investors who feared liability. My confrontation with the CEO was intentionally timed to coincide with Julian's presentation to the board about the company's criminal liability, a presentation interrupted by my emails from the CEO's account, confirming everything Julian alleged. By the time the CEO rushed from his office to find me, the board had already begun emergency protocols to remove him and self-report violations to federal authorities, hoping to secure leniency. 3 hours after my arrest, I sat in an FBI field office, surrounded by agents taking my statement. My phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "Catherine received your package. She's asked to meet you." 2 days later, I sat beside Catherine Voss's hospital bed, in the same facility as my father, though on a private floor. Despite her wealth and privilege, her body showed the same ravages of toxic poisoning. "I always taught him to take responsibility," she said, her voice thin but determined, "to make things right when he caused harm." She handed me a legal document. "This transfers controlling interest in my shares to a trust dedicated to remediation of Riverbrook and medical care for affected residents." "Why trust me with this?" I asked. Her smile was tired but genuine. "Because you risked everything to expose the truth, even when the truth hurt your own family. That's integrity." Within weeks, federal indictments came down against the CEO and key executives. The company entered consent decrees, mandating environmental remediation expected to cost over $1 billion. The trust Catherine established provided immediate medical care for Riverbrook residents, including specialized treatment that improved my father's condition. I declined the whistleblower reward, asking instead that it fund research into treating chromium poisoning. Talia's expose won national awards, bringing attention to similar environmental justice issues nationwide. The system that had protected powerful men like CEO Voss for so long crumbled not because of one whistleblower, but because I understood a simple truth. True justice requires turning someone's own weapons against them. The CEO had used family loyalty, corporate structure, and legal maneuvering to shield himself from consequences. I used those same tools to ensure he could never hide again. If my story has moved you, please take a moment to share it with others who might be facing similar battles against powerful interests. Like and subscribe to hear more stories of corporate accountability. And remember, sometimes the most effective weapon against corruption isn't just exposing the truth, but making sure it reaches exactly the right people at precisely the right moment.